Good. It's time to start. So we're hitting on the hour. Is it the morning or evening or afternoon or nighttime for your location? It slightly depends, obviously, where you are sitting. But anyway, welcome everybody. This is SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group bi-weekly meeting or sync or discussion. This is October 12th. 2017 edition. And at this time, it will be, my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a senior program manager from SharePoint engineering side. So my team is responsible, among the other things, on the SharePoint framework. So we ship the SharePoint framework as part of our deliverables, and we own all of the dev APIs and all of that stuff as well. Now, Patrick Rodgers, who's usually leading this this special interest group and this community call, is on parental leave, so he has a pretty good reason and not to be here. And it's good that he is not joining on the middle of that vacation time and concentrates on his family. So I will be leading this one. We do, however, have 3 different demos coming up on this session as well. So there will be a lot of other people presenting during the session as well. Now let's get on going on the thing. So quickly explaining what the special interest group is all about. So the SharePoint patterns and practices, essentially meaning the SharePoint dev ecosystem, owns all of the guidance, samples, and messaging around the SharePoint development in on-premises or within the SharePoint Online. So the PMP is kind of it's large, and there's a lot of actions happening here, and this is a special interest group around the SharePoint framework and JavaScript development. So this is kind of, I wouldn't say spin-off, but it's a sub-initiative underneath the SharePoint, largest SharePoint PMP initiative. So the whole point of this one is to have an open discussion around the SharePoint framework and client-side development patterns, and always have also SharePoint engineering people in place, so we can actually share the latest and greatest if possible, if there's any questions around capabilities which need to be there or not. Sorry for a small pause because apparently one of our presenters can't get in, so let me invite Jax using alternative routes. One second. So there's there we go. If we can get Jax on the presentation as well. Good. So in this special interest group, originally in the PMP we had a monthly community calls, and pretty fast we realized that having those monthly community calls on a monthly basis isn't actually good enough. There has to be a forum where people can have more open discussions, do demos and all of that. So that's when we started the special interest groups, and we have 2 of them. So we have one for SharePoint framework and JavaScript development, and one for the general SharePoint dev and provisioning and PowerShell side. So and all of the meetings are always on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Pacific time, and we do know that it's a matter of these time zones that it's not suitable for some people, and it might be suitable for some people. We also recommend all of these sessions, so people can actually watch this in the YouTube later on as well. Now, in today's agenda, we'll have a look on the latest on the PMP.js core side. So that is the open source PMP.js core component, which we started developing back in 1.5 years ago. And that one actually provides a nice fluent API on top of the SharePoint REST API. So you don't have to understand and remember what is the REST HTTP addresses. You can use the PMP.js core, which will increase your productivity. Again, completely optional, and you don't have to do that, but that's one of the things which we provide in the PMP as well. So we provide reusable components to increase your productivity. So, and that's one of those. Now, then we'll have a talk about the SharePoint framework latest news. So we'll have a quick chat on the latest, what has happened since the last time we had these meetings. So please do remember to mute yourself. So last time when we did have these meetings, so we'll talk about latest announcements, roadmap, and all of that in that section. That will be me. And then we'll have 3 demos. Now, Jax is having small issues of getting in. So we'll start with Elio, and I will try to get Jax in during Elio's demo. And then we can actually flip between the order. But Jax is going to talk about a new capability, which is called the Tenant Properties, which is in preview for the time being. And it's already available, and he's going to do a live demo on that. And then Ilya is going to talk about a new open source reusable SharePoint framework controls, which are also out as part of the SharePoint, as part of the PMP announcements in Ignite. And this is an awesome initiative as well. So we start providing SharePoint framework controls for you to reuse. And we start harvesting our first-party web parts and share some of those controls for you to reuse within your implementation. Because most likely you will never ever, well, never say never, but it will at least take a while to get the first party web part open sourced, if that will never happen. But we want to have some of the reusable things from those web parts available for you. And this is the easiest way we can actually make that happen. So already right now we have reusable property controls, and then there's some content controls as well. Ilya will go through what's available and show how they can be used. And then Paolo is going to do a more detailed demo around the DiscussNow, which is a list view command set with Microsoft Graph integration. And that one was part of the demos which Paolo did actually already in Ignite, but probably will go slightly more detailed on the behavior of that. Or actually, was this the one which Dan Kogan showed? I can't remember, but let's leave that for Paolo to demonstrate. Anyway, so let's actually move on the other topics. Please do remember to mute yourself. There's quite a lot of, almost like somebody is standing right next to airplane. So let's actually mute things. Good. Now, opportunities to participate in the PMP JavaScript special interest groups. So we're always looking for people to demonstrate and do a live demos on this site, on this course. So if you have interested, please ping me or Patrick Rodgers in Twitter, tech community, in whatever social media or whatever means, and we'll get you queued up for the demo. You can absolutely contribute in GitHub for the PMP JS core or in the reusable samples. You can demonstrate your usage of SPPMP.js in a project if you're using that. That's one way of contributing as well. Or just provide feedback using our community channels. Now, like mentioned, Patrick Rodgers is on parental leave, and luckily he is not joining on this call, which is a good sign. So he will actually have a small break, which absolutely he deserves to have that. But one slide around the PMP.js core component. So the key point of this one is this was something which was started back in 1.5 years ago, way before actually SharePoint Framework was even announced, because we knew what's coming up. And we started actually working together with community on the modern way of doing customization. Somehow, we started pushing community on this direction without people knowing the reasons why we were doing that. And the PMP.js component was actually the reason or the project what we started to build at the time. So this was February 2016. Already at the moment, this fellow is quite widely used because it truly simplifies the access of the SharePoint REST APIs. Again, completely optional. You can use it if you like it. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. But it supports, and you can use it in SharePoint Framework or in the classic JavaScript customization as well. So you can, in a user custom actions, you can use it. It works in on-premises, in SharePoint 2010 even. Well, not in 2010 because there's no REST APIs in 2010. But anyway, it's a really great component which is available for you. We are evolving this quite significantly. Pretty fast, and whenever Patrick is actually back from parental leave. But already at the moment, you can say that we have 1,700 tenants within the last month which were using the SPPMP.js in production in SharePoint Online. Obviously, we don't trace back who's doing that on premises because that's basically impossible. Well, it could call back by home, but we don't actually include that kind of code within our stuff. And if somebody is wondering how do we actually trace this, well, as part of the requests which are going into the SharePoint Online, we're adding a header tag on the request, and that's when we are able to then crawl that from the logs of SharePoint Online because we are SharePoint engineering, so we have access on the logs. That's how we kind of trace back on how many tenants and how many requests are coming in. We don't actually know how it's being used because that's could be considered already as a confidential information. I didn't have any additional things on the PMP.js core side, and that's mainly because I didn't. Well, we want to make sure that Patrick is on place and he has the latest on that one. So I don't want to actually steal any thunder. There's good, great stuff coming up on that side as well. And Jax is again trying to join. Good. But let's actually concentrate on the SharePoint framework. So what's new on the SharePoint framework are a few things, and then we go to the demo, and depending on if Jax can actually we'll see who's actually doing the first demo. Please do remember to mute yourself. Now we have again somebody talking on top of me. There we go. Now, so, a few announcements related on SharePoint Framework or in the context of SharePoint Framework. In Ignite, we announced a new set of reusable controls for your SharePoint Framework solution. And this one is super useful for you to increase your productivity. So you can use them. It's absolutely optional. But the whole point of this one is that you don't have to worry about for example, how do you integrate the taxonomy service to build your own taxonomy picker for your web part. You can use the reusable control to make that happen. And this is a new initiative which we announced in the Ignite. If you go AKMS SPFx controls, that will land you to one of the GitHub repositories around this one. We'll do more documentation around how to contribute, how to get started, and all of that all the time. But if you go to the wikis of these repos, you can actually find already how to use these controls, and also there's cross-linking between the content controls and the property pane controls. And Elio will walk through both of these options in the demo. Now, the second big thing which we announced from a community perspective in Ignite is the reusable solution samples. So, and I didn't update the title. Why is it? Okay, I forgot to update the title. I do apologize on that. I updated the images, but not the title of the slide. But the solution samples are more polished and more ready to use web parts which are in their own repo. And these are being reviewed by our engineering more closely. And the whole point of this one is that they're more ready to be used solutions rather than just random samples showing a scenario. So in the SPFx web parts, as an example, in the GitHub, many of those solutions and many of those are quite simplistic samples. They show a scenario, how to make something happen, or the hidden API, but they're not necessarily ready to be used in production. Now, this one is more around the SPFx solution, is more around ready to be used. You can easily configure them. We'll provide additional guidance and documentation on them as well. Right now, the situation isn't quite optimal, but we're looking into having Mike Amelan, who's from the marketing and who's been leading this effort in by week, within 2 weeks, in the SIG to actually go through the latest and greatest on this one. But you can already go to the GitHub, have a look on what's available, what are the web parts, and what do they actually do, and then have a look on the code and learn from them as well. Now, quickly before we go to the actual demo section, I don't have too many minutes, but I wanted to quickly list the latest on the SharePoint development, and this is kind of the SPFx++, because there's a few things added there by me, which are not really around the SharePoint framework. But if you think about what has now shipped during the Ignite week, and that was 2 weeks ago or 1.5 weeks ago, well, slightly before Ignite, we shipped SharePoint Framework in on-premises, and this was with the SharePoint Framework Feature Pack 2. So if you're using SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack 2, that will support now SharePoint Framework in a classic pages. And it's in classic pages because SharePoint 2016 doesn't have the modern experiences. So, but you can still write one piece of code which work in SharePoint 2016 and also in SharePoint Online. And there's videos available and guidance available on that one as well. We also announced pretty recently easily deploy web parts and extension across the enterprise, and this refers to the tenant scope deployment option, which we did have also a webcast released this Monday, so a few days ago. If you go to the PMP YouTube channel or to the dev.office.com/blogs, we actually walked through in a webcast, me and Waldek, what are the options, what is the impact of the tenant scope deployment, what does it mean in practice. We also announced the Yeoman generator, which 1.3, which understands on-premises and cloud. which is a cool thing. So there's a one yeoman generator. Depending on your selection, it will then scaffold you a solution which is targeted for on-premises and cloud, or only the cloud. And the reason why there is that question is quite simply the cloud is always ahead of the on-prem, and because there's a server-side dependencies on the SharePoint framework versions, we can't update your local on-premises box as often as we update SharePoint Online. SharePoint Framework extensions are now generally available since Ignite. That's an awesome announcement as well. So you can actually in production use application customizers, field customizers, list view customizers. So a massive deal. So you can actually do end-to-end customizations in the modern experiences, which is a great thing. The tenant properties are now in dev preview. So now that Jax is on a call, Jax can actually start immediately when I stop as the first person to do the demo. Then we'll move to Elio and Paulo. And Jax is going to explain what that is all about. One new thing also, which is not related on SharePoint Framework, but around the SharePoint development, is the modern themes, modern custom themes, and they are now available in SharePoint Online as well. What's coming soon? Office UI Fabric core support. So core styling support is coming soon. There will be more Microsoft Graph support, so you're able to configure within your tenant additional scopes to be available rather than just the locked scope which are in the Graph HTTP client. There will be ALM APIs, and these actually apply also to add-ins, so not just only for SharePoint Framework Solutions. So you're able to remotely install add-ins which have been installed to the app catalog. As long as they're in app catalog, you're able to push them running an API and install them to the individual sites within your tenant, and also upgrading and deleting and all of that. Then we have site-specific app catalog or site collection-specific app catalog coming up pretty soon as well. And also the last thing, which again isn't really around the SharePoint framework, is the site designs with an extensibility point. The point of that one is the fact that you're able to integrate your own customizations to the out-of-the-box site provisioning story. And that's coming up pretty soon as well. Among the other things, you could push out your SharePoint Framework extensions on top of communication site whenever the communication site is getting provisioned. That's really the key point of that one. Now, let's move on to the demo section so I don't actually eat up any additional time from the demos. Now that Jax is in, Jax, you can actually steal the presentation and you can start this. Now you're unmuted. Can we hear you? All good?
Excellent. I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good, all good. And the screen is loading.
Let me know when you guys see the screen.
And I got it.
Some people.
I got it. All good to go.
Excellent. So first things, I don't know whether this is an issue or not, but if you actually download the invitation you have in your short link and I open it in my Mac, I actually don't get the Skype meeting information, anything at all in the calendar.
That's not the demo what people are waiting. So
I know.
We can talk about that after the meeting.
Yeah. So tenant properties. So this is something we announced at Ignite. And this is a way for developers to have a property set that they can have it in the common tenant app catalog and basically consume them in your web parts or in extensions. So some examples could be that you would want to store your Google Analytics key or Google Maps key so that your Maps web part can actually use that key instead of having it as a configurable property. We have started it small. So that we can extend it when we release other features in our SPFx. So basically the documentation, if you go to SharePoint framework documentation, and in the table of contents on the left, you will see the tenant properties here. And this documentation is still evolving. I'm writing more, Bessa and I have been discussing on this. But we basically started out with giving a PowerShell commandlets for get and set. And we're basically calling it as storage entity in the tenant. And you can add key and value and give some description and comments so that this key is for this particular scenario, or this is a Google Analytics key. And if you have any comments, maybe you need to tell someone to go to this person to update this key. So you can have those comments as well. And the way that we are consuming this is through the API. We have a Get API, which basically now you can go to any site and say, get me the storage entity of the key. And once you give that key, it'll give you back all of the properties that you have for that entity from the tenant app catalog. Today, this is all in the tenant app catalog, and you need to be a tenant administrator to work with this PowerShell commandlet. But as you saw the previous slide, we do have site collection app catalog coming up. That means that this is not just for the tenant app catalog, but once we have the site collection app catalog, the goal is that these things work according to that specific scoped site collection as well. And that's why we have this -site kind of that lets developers and tenant administrators specify which site you're working against. Now, to start with this, you need to download the Microsoft SharePoint Online Management Shell. You can get the link from the doc as well. If you're familiar with this, then you know that the way that you first connect to the service is through the connect-SPO service command, and you basically have to give your SharePoint admin center URL. And once you're authenticated with this service, so basically now you can use the set SPO storage entity. And if you give the enter, if you hit enter, it's going to ask you for all of the parameters. And initially, this is, as I said, it's working against the app catalog. So you need to give the app catalog URL for this. And then it's going to ask you a key. Let's say PNP key. Value is Vesa. Comments. This is a PNP key. This is a description. And now it's going to basically save this. And apologies, my machine somehow is taking some time to reach the service. I don't know why. It might be my wireless connection. So this is going to get added to the tenant app catalog key, and now it will be available for apps to consume, and even for tenant administrators to go and remove this key, or just get the key and see what the value is. Just making sure. So any questions so far? I don't know, there was a chat window.
No, nothing. No, I can break you if there's any questions. Random things. Who can read those properties? Anybody that have access to the catalog is a good question.
Correct. So anybody, so read is available to everyone. So anybody can read it. So of course, in the tenant PowerShell, you would need to be a tenant admin because it's not available to other users. But if you use the get SPO storage entity, now you can basically say what's the site. And again, here the point is that this is a storage entity for a site. And right now it's available for the app catalog in the tenant app catalog website. Now imagine when we have the site collection app catalog, you can basically use any site collection that have that app catalog enabled in that scope. So I'm going to type this out. Now it's going to ask me the key. Let's say PNP key. And then it's going to give me the comment description value. And one thing, if you notice closely, the comment and description are, they're not the same. They're just flipped. But we are fixing that, and it will be fixed very soon. So basically, this is the way how you can set and get from the tenant PowerShell, tenant SharePoint Online Management Shell. Now, for developers, we also have the API. So for example, here I am in my site in the same tenant that I was using, and I can just go to my site /my_team/_API /web. So underneath the web, we have get storage entity, and all you need to pass is the key. So we did PNP key, and that's going to basically give you the XML back. And of course, you can request change the body and request the JSON, and you'll get the JSON back. Now you can see we have the PNP key, we have the comment, and we have the description, and we also have the value here. So that's how you can request this from your web part through this API, which is available for every user. And that will give you back the key, and then you can use it into any other solution that you have in your extension and web part. So that's basically the simplest form of having a property common across all of your solutions that you want to build in a tenant that you want to consume this from. Yeah, so that's the feature. Any questions so far, Reza? Do you want me to show anything else?
No, I think that's all good. Any random questions? I don't think there was any non-answered questions around this one.
Oh yeah, I forgot about one thing. So this is still in preview. It's available for only first release tenants. We want to push this to GA so everybody can start using it. I also have a tech community post under the SharePoint developer space. So far, one person has replied, thank you to that person. But if you are interested in this feature and if you can use it and let me know what you think about this and what other things, do you see any bugs or anything like that, let us know in the tech community post, because we are looking to push this to GA as soon as possible.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks to Jax for this one. It's a relatively simple scenario, but I think it's super powerful, because there was a good example in the Ion chat window was it a Azure function REST endpoint, which all of your web part instances should be using. So you would have one location where you configure that, and then the web parts can access that from that. You don't need to set the property in every single instance, as an example. Or what would be the other scenarios for this one? Any good examples, Jackson? This one?
Anything that, if you want to deploy a component and you don't want that, you want to use a property that you don't want to put in the property pane, so that not every user has to configure it for every page. For example, for every page they add the web part to, then this becomes a very viable solution to push that forward. Maybe there is a common endpoint that you always refer to and you want it to be common across all the web parts, or maybe there is a key that you want to refer to whenever you load an extension on a page at the bottom or at the top.
Yeah.
And at that point, you got this property back to go refer to and consume that property.
Yeah. So there's a good example from Ryan kind of mentioning that, hey, what about a help desk email address? You might have a header of
exactly.
has a help desk link, and then this is the way how you configure that centrally for all of the instances across all of your tenant. Really good.
Correct. Because without this, you would have to configure in the property pane of the web part, for example.
Yep.
Oh, I don't know. It's small on my screen. It's just tiny on my screen, but who cares?
Okay.
So let's switch to this demo and maybe later come back to the previous one.
Yeah.
So this demo is about the DiscussNow command set that we introduced at Ignite 2017, a couple of weeks ago. And this is basically a list view and library command set to allow users to create on the fly a meeting for a document selected in a document library. So this is the repo in which you can find the source code of the sample, the well-known SPFx extensions repo, and the solution is under the samples React command DiscussNow folder. Just to set the context, let me show first of all the extension in action, and then I will explain you how it works under the cover. So this is the homepage of a modern site in which, by the way, you have yet another example that we have still on GitHub in the same repo, but this is not the sample we will see today. And if I go into a document library like the documents here, I can just select one document, like, for example, the press release, innovative, whatever else, docx document. And whenever I select one single document, I can press on the custom DiscussNow button that I have here in the top menu area, as well as in the ACB menu area. And whatever I will click, I will have a nice dialog based on the SharePoint framework dialog framework, which is still a new framework released, I guess, a few weeks ago, just before Ignite, if I'm not mistaken. And using this nice dialog, you can simply define when you want to meet with all of the people which are members of the Office 365 group backing your modern site to discuss about this document. So let's say that I want to meet all of these people on next Friday at, let's say, 12:30 or 10:30 in the morning. And it will be a couple of hours meeting because it's a big document and we need to discuss quite a lot about it. So as soon as I will press the OK button in the calendar of my group, which right now is almost free on next Friday, I will have a new meeting to discuss about this document. And the meeting will be created using the Microsoft Graph. So if I go to my group conversation and if I open the calendar of my group, and hopefully the network is still okay, but let me know in case of an issue. As you can see, here I have the press release, innovative, whatever document meeting, which is the one we just set up using the app. Of course, as you can see, the timing is in the Pacific time, and so I'm using the European time zone creating the meeting, and it will be set in the target time zone of the environment. But aside from that, this is a nice command set extension to show you how you can leverage SharePoint framework to provide nice UI and to extend the out-of-the-box capability of the environment. So let's see how it works. First of all, it is a SharePoint framework extension. So here I have a Visual Studio Code instance in which I have the full source code of the solution. And from a solution perspective, first of all, for our extension, we have a manifest file in which we have a unique ID, which identifies our command set, our custom extension. And in the items section of the manifest, we define one discuss now item, which will have a specific title, a custom icon, and it will be a command. Moreover, we have a TypeScript file in which we export a class which internally extends the base list view command set type, which is provided by the SharePoint Framework Extensions infrastructure. And here what we do, simply in the onListViewUpdated method overriding, we double check if there is one and only one item selected in the UI. So whenever this onListViewUpdated event fires, we get the event input argument. We select the property for having the list of all of the selected rows. And in case we have just one row, we make visible the custom command in the UI, because we don't want to handle multiple meetings with one click, at least not in this demo. But if you like, you can work on it and you can share your experience with the community, because as everything else, it's an open source project. Moreover, whenever the end users will click on the Discuss Now button, we will have the overriding of the onExecute method, in which we will still get an event object, and we can simply double check what is the command ID of the event that has been fired by the user. And if it is the Discuss Now event, which I want to remind you is the ID that we have here in the collection of items in our manifest file, well, if it is the Discuss Now item, well, we can just get from the selected row, which will be the unique one we have, some of the metadata fields like the ID, the file leaf ref to get the URL of the file, and some other information related to the file that has been selected, which is selected in the UI. Once we have done that, we create a new dialog object, which is based on the SharePoint Framework dialog framework, and I will show you how it works pretty soon. And we just set a few properties of this dialog object, and we show the dialog. So all of the magic, let me say, is done by the dialog. And in fact, here we have the schedule meeting dialog React component, which provides, first of all, a schedule meeting dialog content, which will be a class, which will implement, it will be a component, which will implement all the UI stuff of our dialog. So as you can see, it extends the component base type of React. We have some custom properties and a state object to hold the state of our dialog content object. In the render method of our component, we simply use a dialog content object, which inside will have a bunch of Office UI Fabric components, like, for example, the text field for the document title, which will become the meeting subject. We define a date time picker control, which is a custom one we built on top of the date picker, adding the time, the hour and minute selection beside the date selection. We have a drop-down control through which we select the duration of the meeting. And of course, we have a dialog footer with a couple of buttons to cancel or to create, to submit the creation of the meeting. Once the submit button got pressed, in the dialog component that we have here, which extends the base dialog component again of the SharePoint Framework dialog framework, we simply do the rendering of our dialog content. And upon the click on the submit button, we will have the submit function, which will use the Microsoft Graph to create a new meeting in the calendar. So how we do that? First of all, we create a JSON object in memory, which will define the event which will be created in the calendar. So we get the date and time, the start and end date time of the meeting, just working with the date and time variables, as you can see here. Then we get the group, the Office 365 group, backing our modern site. And to do that, we use the context of SharePoint Framework. We get the page context, and in the legacy page context, we get the group ID that we are targeting, so that we can create an iGraph HTTP client options object, an object that implements this interface. And we create in the body of the request for the HTTP graph client the event object, which will be made of a body, a subject, a start, and an end date time for our meeting. Once we have the request ready to be sent, we just use the context of SharePoint Framework and the graph HTTP client object in the context to make a post HTTP request targeting the version 1.0 endpoint of graph, the groups, and the specific group that we have in target, the calendar of that group, and all of the events, the collection of all of the events of that calendar. So by doing this post of the JSON object, we will create the meeting, the event in the calendar. And then we simply handle the response, which can be a positive one. So we simply say, okay, all good. Or we can have an issue and we can simply notify the issue to the end users. That's the overall picture of the implementation of the command set. One more thing that I think is really useful to underline is that this solution, from a packaging and deployment perspective, has been defined in order to be a solution which has to be installed in every single target site collection. So we don't use the so-called tenant-wide deployment, which is one of the new features introduced around the Ignite conference timing. So because of that, in this scenario, whenever we do the packaging of the solution, we also package inside the SPFx file a feature framework element file, which I can show you. And in this feature framework file, we define a custom action, which will simply target all of the lists of type 101, which means all of the document libraries, and which will add in this location, which is the one which identifies both the ACB menu and the top menu area on the list view screen, this client-side component ID, which of course is the ID of the command set that we have in our manifest file. So whenever you will install the package in the app catalog and add the package in your target set collection, by adding the package in your target set collection, the feature framework custom action will be activated and you will find the command set available in all of the document libraries in your environment. Now, let's say that you want to use the same capability, but you want to use the tenant-wide deployment. You can simply go back to the package solution. You can enable by setting to true this guy, the skip feature deployment property, and you can find in the source code of this project a nice PowerShell script which uses the PnP cmdlets to connect to whatever is your target environment and to add the custom action, either using the add PnP custom action cmdlet, if you want to add exactly as we did before with the feature framework, your custom action to all of the libraries, so all of the list of type 101 in your target environment. Or if you rather prefer, you can even use this option, which by using CSOM in PowerShell will simply bind this command set to any specific library that you want to target. And here you can see an example in which I target the document library and I add a custom action just and only for that specific document library. Just to give you a pointer to the SharePoint framework, dialog framework, this is the article which explains you how to install, first of all, and then how to play with the dialog framework, which I think is really, really interesting and powerful. And more in general, as I told you, the full source code of the solution is on the GitHub repo for SPFx extensions. I think that's all of my side, Vesa. So if you want, we can try to go back to Ilio, or we can...
Yes, let's try. Ilio is back online, so let's try to move to Ilio. Thank you.
Hopefully it goes better right now.
Welcome.
So let's
try again.
Yep, sounds good. Feel free to steal the presentations.
You're seeing my screen?
Yes, and it's much faster. Can you do something? Can you put a web part there? Yeah, it's much faster. No, feel free to take it away.
Fantastic.
Please do restart from the start.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut that section from the recording. So
perfect. So
timing.
Yeah, and now they start calling. Oh, yeah. Let's just keep it there. Okay, so at Ignite, we released two sets of controls. One is the SharePoint Framework controls for React, which are obviously using React components or can be used in React components. And the other one is the property pane controls. So the controls you can use for customizing the properties of your web part. So let's first focus on the React controls. On NPM, there's a repository npnp/SPFx controls. So somebody, wait.
Okay, somebody says for sure. Causing some problems for Ilya. This presentation of these controls isn't going that well. So let's take number 3 when we get Ilya back online. We'll cut this away. Okay, here we go.
My excuses for that. There were children playing door by door.
Cool. Cool. Okay, so let's restart. Take number 3.
Okay. Oh boy. So at Ignite, we released two sets of controls. One, the controls for React, which are obviously used in React components. And the second part is the property pane controls, which are controls that you can use in the web part configuration pane. So let's first focus on the SharePoint Framework controls for React. Currently, if you go to npm, so npmjs.com, and search for @pmp/SPFx-controls-react, you will end up on this page. You can also go to this link, which is the GitHub repository, which will bring you over here, and we will give you more information about how you can install them. So just explore the wiki. Normally, okay, there it is. And currently we released 4. Did I open the wrong one? Okay, then we start with the property controls. Currently we released 4 property controls, which are the property field date picker control, the list picker, the people picker, and the term picker. So let's open up the term picker, for example. This term picker is going to give you what the name says. It's going to give you a term picker, so it's going to go over your manage metadata term sets, and it's going to visualize them, and it's going to allow you to select some terms. You can do a multi-selection, you can do a single selection. All can be done by just providing the right values in the property. You also see the codes, how you need to add it to your web art, and so on and so on. But one important thing, if you go to the Getting Started, on the Getting Started page, you see what you have to actually install. So this is what you need to install, and then you can go to the property pane controls to add them to your web art to start using them. So let me open the project. So this is a project. Inside the project, both for the control set for React and for the property pane, you will find a sample web art. In that sample web art, we added all the property pane control pickers, and also for the controls for React, we added the controls inside the web art. So if you want to contribute to this library, feel free to do so. But just be aware that you also add the control to the web art so we can test it and people can explore how they work. So in this web art, you can see that all the field pickers are configured. So like for instance, here you see the property field term picker and so on. So let's start up this sample. And once this is running, I can go to my website. So let me open this one, and normally it should be there. They should also work offline. So if you want to do some tests offline, you can also use the local workbench. I just want to show the online workbench because then I can show more information. So you see the people picker, I can search for myself. So I can add myself in there. I can also specify multiple lists. And here we have the term picker. And in the term picker, we can just open our term sets. It's going to load the terms, and then we can select a couple of them, like for instance, these kind of things. In my configuration, I disabled my date picker, so that's why it's grayed out, just for a test. And now if I apply it, you see that the configuration has been added. This is how you can use it. It's very simple, or we made it very simple for you so that you don't have to do a lot of configuration, and most of the configuration is added on the documentation site or on the wiki of the repository.
And one point, Ilya, on the picker. So the taxonomy picker is no doubt one of my favorites in here, because you don't have to worry, and it's a good example, what's the difference between these controls and Office UI Fabric React controls. So these are meant to be an abstraction layer on top of Office UI Fabric controls. The Office UI Fabric controls, they don't actually know that they're being used in SharePoint. These fellows know. So as an example, the taxonomy picker is hiding all of the traffic between your web part and SharePoint. You don't have to provide the needed URLs and REST endpoints, and in that case, the magic behind of hitting the taxonomy store. All of that is getting encapsulated inside of the control. You just control, is it a single picker or multi-picker, and you'll be good to go. But yeah, sorry, jumping in.
Oh, no problem. Good addition to it. So we also have the controls for React. That contains 4 other controls, which is the file type icon control, the list view control, the placeholder control, and the side breadcrumb control. If we open the placeholder control, you will see this is a control that was previously it was added by SharePoint Framework itself, and then it was removed. So we added it again so that you have this availability of the control again. Same kind of configuration steps, although the configuration for this web part or for this control is a bit different because this is being used inside a React component, and it requires a couple of things, like for instance the icon name you want to use in here, like for instance the pen, the text you want to show, the button, which label it needs to have, and what do you want to do when you click on the button. Like for instance, here we gave the example of opening the property pane. So let's go to that demo. So let's kill this one and let's open up this. It's already open probably. So let's open this, and it's this demo. So same structure. In this structure, we have the controls. You will find all the controls. And we also have a web part, a sample web part. And in this sample web part, you will see that there is a lot of content, but that's just for the demo reasons, so we can test all the controls. In there, you also will find unit tests. So every control in there will also have its own unit test. So if you want to go through the unit test, feel free to do so, so you can see how it works. So normally it should be running. And if I go back to my website over here, then I should have a configuration part. Let's refresh. Controls test. And once this is added, you see that we have a file type icon controller. It works with font icons and images. So these are coming from Office UI Fabric. We can play with the sizes. There are by default 3 sizes available for the images. So we can test them out. So the medium-sized images or the small images. We have a breadcrumb control. Right now I'm on my root site, so I only see my root site. But if I go to another site, I would see deeper levels of that. I have the configuration or the placeholder control, so I can click on this and it will open my property pane, and I have my list view control set. So if you want to explore more, we also released a sample web part that is probably more functional, which you can find in the sample gallery repository of SharePoint on GitHub. And if we are going to show you that demo shows a couple of controls that are combined together, so to give a good view of what it can do. So this web part is using the property controls. So if we are going to check, it should be in there, or didn't I remove, or over here. You see at PMP, you see the SPFx controls for React, and you see the property controls. So what did I do in here? In my controls web part, I'm using currently one list picker. And the list picker will be used to pass through the selected list to my component, and that component will retrieve the list and will retrieve the items from that list or library. So it's going to use the placeholder. It will show me a placeholder if the web part is not configured. Once the web part is configured, it will show me a spinner when it's retrieving the items, and when the items are retrieved, it will show me the items via the list view control. If there are no items to be found, it will show me a placeholder control that says, yes, sorry, no items have been found. Let's spin this one up. So let's see if it's already. Okay, it's there. So first of all, it's going to say, hey, you need to configure your web part. That's what I explained. And then we have our list view title, and we have our list picker. So I can say, okay, give me the documents. If I apply this, then it's going to show me my documents from my document library. Now, what can we do if we are going back towards that property controls, and I would add the term picker? What should I do for a term picker? Hopefully it's always that simple. So in my case, I just have to copy everything. In your case, it could be that you still have to configure a couple of parameters or properties. So I first configure the interfaces I require in my web part. And once I add this, then I will be able to use the property term picker in my web part. So let's use this piece of the code. I'm just going to skip this one. This is the property that the web part is using. So it will store the selected terms inside the property called terms. So that's already configured. It's not really that advanced stuff. And hopefully if I did everything correctly, there were only 2 steps. So normally nothing should be going wrong. Let's do a refresh. And if I still refreshing properly, yeah, it was still reloading. So if I going back, now I see that I also have the select terms. If I click on this one and I go to countries and I would say Antwerp, because I love Antwerp. I live there, so I click apply. If I can click, you see that my list gets refreshed based on the selected term. So it does a query to my document library with give me all the documents linked to Antwerp. So this is how you can use the property pane controls from our new libraries that are available on NPM. So that was it for the demo. Are there any questions, Vesa?
Not really on the Ion window. I think great demo, actually great coverage on the simplicity of actually using those controls in practice as well. And like mentioned when we started the webcast, the special interest group, our intention is absolutely to start harvesting the first-party web parts. So there are, it may or may not happen in the future that some of the first-party web parts will be open source, but we don't know if that's going to happen, so it's better for us and easier for us to actually harvest ideas from our SharePoint engineering and then share them through this control set in the future. Right now we do have 4 or 5 controls for both of those control sets. But we will absolutely have additional controls coming up. We also welcome other people to contribute on this. Let's rather build a common set of controls which we use together and use the engineering resources also to review the code and to give input on the code. So rather than everybody implementing their own stuff all over again. What other new controls are planned? Well, there's a pretty high long list of things what we've been thinking. Web part title, web part Chrome. There's additional panels and dialogues and simplicity on those. But we should probably do a better job on the wiki to list the next step of things what we're planning to do. Yeah. But cool. We're 3 minutes on top of the late already from the schedule, so I do apologize on that. We did have some audio and video issues while we were
probably my fault.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. But I'll cut them away from the recording, and the recording will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you Jax and Paolo and Elio for your great demos. Thank you also for the participants on your input. Please keep the input coming in the GitHub issue list, SP DevDocs issue list is good. If it's a new idea, new capability, go to the user voice and submit issues and submit an entry on there. If you're interested on these controls, please use them or give us feedback. Why wouldn't you use them? So we really want to help you to be more successful, and increase your productivity while doing development on top of the modern SharePoint. But thank you everybody. Thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you on the next special interest group call. Thank you. Bye-bye.